Welcome to Queenmaker. This is a spirit-led conversation space for women who lead, create, and influence with intention. I'm Natasha Hilsman, and here we explore wisdom and strategy, mentorship and legacy, and what it truly means to lead with presence, clarity, and soul. Queenmaker was created for women who are done rushing, done shrinking, and ready to be visible without abandoning themselves. Because queens are not born, they are made. So wherever you're listening from, take a breath, settle into yourself. You're in the right place. Welcome to the Queenmaker Podcast. This is a space for women who lead with wisdom, with intention, and with the understanding that leadership is not just about position, but about presence. Today's episode is especially meaningful to me because it marks the first official conversation of the Queenmaker Podcast. I'm so excited about this. And the theme we're exploring sets the tone for everything that follows. Mentors, makers, and queens, the art of rising together. This conversation is about supporting others without losing yourself in the process. It's about partnership, not sacrifice, visibility, not invisibility, and leadership that allows you to pour into others while still honoring your own growth, your own voice, and your own becoming. For many women, especially those of us in the leadership development, coaching, and mentoring, we are often behind the scenes. We're building leaders, shaping talent, and preparing others for what's next. But Queenmaker asks a deeper question. How do we continue to uplift others and fully stand in our own light? That's why I couldn't imagine having this conversation without two women who have lived this work professionally, personally, and spiritually. So today I'm joined by Lisa Walker and Dr. Monique Dawkins. I have known each of them for more than 10 years. We work together in organizations where leadership and executive development were not just programs, they were foundations. Lisa Walker is a vice president of talent management and inclusion. Her work spans leadership development, succession planning, and coaching. She has spent her career building leaders with intention and humanity, helping organizations think not only about who is leading today, but who they are preparing for tomorrow. Lisa, thank you for joining us today. Dr. Monique Dawkins is a senior director of operations and executive leadership and team coach, and she's the author of You Know Best, 10 Rules to Elevate Your Leadership Power. She brings operational excellence, emotional intelligence, and coaching mastery together, bridging strategy and soul in the way she develops leaders and teams. But beyond their credentials, what matters most to me is who they are. They are mentors, they are makers, they are queens in their own right. They are women who know what it means to support others, to guide from beside and behind, and to continue stepping forward themselves with clarity, confidence, and purpose. They're not just my colleagues. They're not just my friends. They're my sisters. So today we're sitting together to talk honestly about leadership, about mentorship, about visibility, about succession, and about becoming, and about how we rise not alone, but together. Let's begin. So I'd love to hear from both of you. So when you think back to the beginning of your leadership journey, what first called you into this work of developing leaders and supporting others? What was it for you?
It's a great question. For me, I can actually point back to a couple of milestones, even as early in probably elementary school, where while I didn't know that it was called leadership, but there were times where I just found myself being out front and also stepping up for things that, our teachers and guidance counselors perhaps ask us to take advantage of. And then as I continue to grow in my career, I recognized in myself that there were opportunities to really kind of put myself in a position to not only be a leader for myself, but then I had a personal interest in helping other people develop.
Okay.
And so early on, I kind of developed a mantra for myself that I really wanted to be a part of helping others empower themselves, both professionally and personally. And many times I didn't even really recognize it in that for myself, but other people found it very easy to engage in conversation with me. And I had a special interest in really wanting to help people propel their career further. So I would say in my early 20s, I began to really explore what organizational development is. And believe it or not, the first time that I really had a conversation with someone on how I could develop other people, they kind of discouraged me from pursuing that route.
Really?
Yes.
Why was that? Do you know?
They had their own personal experiences, didn't think that the career, they felt was very niche and hard to get in. And so that stifled me for just a little bit. But then, I kept getting pulled back to that work. And so I began to explore opportunities, and I found myself being very energized when I helped others. And that was really kind of the foundation for me exploring opportunities to strengthen my credentials and further my education where I could develop people more formally. And it's really just been an opportunity where I found a lot of purpose and passion. And often I say to myself every day that this is work that I would do for free and that I don't
too loud.
So I know, right? But it is really, I think, something that is kind of that this is your life's work. Right. And that I'm called to do this. And so when I look back over some of these experiences, I can really start connecting the dots early on kind of what drew me to leadership.
Right.
And then these opportunities, I just kind of reinforce that this is where I'm supposed to be.
It's hard to even imagine you doing anything different anyway.
It is. I know. It is.
Yeah. Monique?
Yeah, I guess for me, I think I've always been very driven. And so I knew I wanted to be in management and be in charge, right? That's how it kind of started for me after undergrad. So I was kind of on my own journey to grow and develop and just kind of reach that ceiling, if you will, or the top of the ladder. I think that after getting the titles and having the experience, the scope, the people reporting to me and all of that, I started to get tired.
Okay.
And I started getting tired of feeling like I'm having a groove and then I'm falling off. I'm having a groove and then I'm falling off. And I started to realize that maybe I needed to shift in my perspective. And it turned to being from about growth to being like impact.
Okay.
And when I thought about how can I make the best impact, it was not only focusing on myself, but it was expanding my thought process to like developing other people and saying the people that either reported to me or worked with me, sharing some of my secret sauce and my superpowers with them. And that started to make me feel really good because I feel like I was kind of starting to tap into that impact space, which is where I didn't realize, but that's where I longed to be.
Did anyone tell you had a secret sauce, or you just figure that out that you had a sauce? Because you do have a sauce. I mean, you do have a way that you that's very special to you. I mean, you and Lisa. But do you remember when you realized that you actually had a sauce?
I didn't know I had a sauce until very recently, to be honest with you. I think that after so many people keep telling you something, you're like, oh, maybe I do have a recipe that I wasn't aware of. But I just was doing what I felt was the right thing at the right time. And I pride myself on that in general, in my personal life, but professionally. And so if I saw something in somebody, then something about it wanted me to give them feedback and give them advice and say like, that like you should be applying for this job. Right. You should be doing this. You should be doing that. And so again, I think I just organically, wanted to help other people without kind of thinking about me. It wasn't about me or what I can, contribute to them. But I think later on, I feel like maybe there was something to it.
And after a while, the word gets out. I think at least you were saying that somebody had just called you. You're like, how did they even get my my number? It's people who know that you understand talent and you can help them. So, yeah. Okay. So both of you have spent years shaping leadership from behind the scenes. And, we all worked together and we all did that. It's great. What is something people don't always see about the emotional or like the energy that it takes on developing others, especially if you're doing that from behind?
Yeah, great question. I think something that people don't see also is that you have to be constantly working on yourself, which can take a lot of energy, right? And so you're always thinking about ways to refuel yourself and focus on your well-being, but then also kind of staying up on your craft. So that requires additional learning for yourself, making sure that you have the right tools and resources. And also, as we think about the coaching space, it's also teaching people how to fish for themselves. So it's really making sure you're being mindful, that you're working on your emotional intelligence, knowing when you're feeling burnt out and don't have the most resiliency, that how do you ground yourself to be aware of where you are as well as when you're trying to help others. And so often people, I feel like in this space, you're putting on a show a lot, right? Because you have to kind of project your positive attitude. We often say role model the behaviors that you want other people to have. And so often people don't get to see that, we carry a lot on our shoulders as well, and that we're also focusing on our own development. But when we work with others, of course, we are transparent, and when we show a lot of humility and we show our authentic selves, but it is a heavy load to carry. So often, I think when you're in this space, when you're helping others to grow, you're also making sure self-care and recognizing when the weights are getting heavy, how to make sure that you're managing that in a way where you can help other people focus on themselves as well.
So I'm just thinking of the times we're all coaches and that we've supported people and how much energy that it actually takes. I don't think a lot of folks people understand because they do it in different parts of their life. I'm not saying you're a coach, then you don't put energy in anybody else. But can you think of like a time where, you really, it was just something just really crazy that happened? I'll go first. Okay. So I just remember I was working with this leader and literally this person was in the closet in their office on the floor. Like I'm not in that building. I'm not in that space, but really trying to help that. And they weren't in like an emotional crisis situation. So we're not talking about something that's clinical. It was just really something they had to do that was, they were pretty scared to do, in leadership. And I think sometimes people assume like when you're a certain level, like you don't ever have any of those kind of days and you always know what to say and how to say it. And that's not true. We know this and we would never disclose, but we know that there is no level leadership where somebody's not pouring into that person.
Absolutely.
What do you think?
I think that we were kind of tapping into this before the show, but saying that sometimes the higher you go, the bigger the title you have, the more responsibilities you have, the more encouragement and support you need from somebody else.
Right.
What comes up for me is it can be draining, but I also think like you need to have a lot of courage.
Okay.
Like I remember having conversations with like pretty senior executives and, they're just painting the picture on the things that they want or they start fumbling over their words and, I'll give them a chance to get it out. And then I'll lean in and say, what is it that you really want?
Yeah.
And they'll like be looking like a deer in the headlight. Like, I just want you to do what I said.
Yeah.
And it's like, do you really want me to do what you said? Or is there something deeper? So again, I think like the job of a coach, the job of, managing up is really having the courage to have that kind of difficult conversation with somebody who's way above your pay grade.
Right.
But they need to hear it. And they need to hear it from somebody who are people like us. Who can kind of have the voice from the people down below.
Yeah.
And, the credentials and the emotional intelligence that Lisa was talking to say, I'm going to keep confidentiality, but I need you to keep it real and dig deep right now.
And, that's the job. You put energy, but then you got to go home. And then there's people there that expect for you to like pour into them too. And you're like, you don't have nothing to give at that point, right? Am I wrong? It's definitely a process, I think. So, it could be difficult, but not something that you can't overcome. Yeah. So at some point, many women reach a crossroad. Been there. They realize they can no longer be behind the curtain. They just can't do it anymore. And, it could be for different reasons, too, and we could talk about that. So was there a moment specifically for each of you or a season when you consciously chose to step forward and allow yourself to be visible while remaining committed to developing others? Like, just so think of that visual. You're behind the curtain. Usually the person you're supporting is out front. I always say this, I'm making sure that they got their shoes on, they got their eyelashes on, like they got the lipstick on, like, they look good from behind, but I'm behind. But this time, you decide to come from behind the curtain and maybe stand beside them, maybe in front of them, maybe they ain't there. But can you think of a moment when that happened for you?
That's an interesting question, because for me, actually, often when I get to the point where I am pushed out front, it's usually someone helping to pull me along, right?
Okay.
And so often folks see you in your leadership and they think that you have this kind of grand rising where this is your moment. And I think this kind of also lends itself to the conversation that I think that everyone needs an advocate for themselves as too. People who see something in you that you might not see in yourself. So when I reflect for me, I do think I'm in a season of being out front, but I think there were a ton of people along my journey encouraging me to be out front and making sure I feel like I know I can. But then once I was out front, then it was like, okay, I'm here where I belong. But I think all the things that you're doing along the way prepare you for those moments. So I think what you'll find is that many of us queens are really trying to find our voice. And even though once we get there, it looks like there was no bumps along the way. Right. But I think once you find your space, it's really tapping into, what about being out front either energizes you or that you still struggle with, because you're still going to have your moments where, sometimes I want to be behind the scenes.
Yeah.
I do. There are days.
I remember, Lisa.
Yeah. And even today, there's days where I'll say, I question my life choices.
That's right.
Because
I'm so glad you agreed to be.
I know, right? Podcast. Because for me, it takes a lot of energy.
Yes.
I'm not naturally wired to be out in front, but because I do well, people are often surprised. So I think it's like giving yourself grace that while you do that well, it might not be natural for you. But I think once you get there, it's like you kick the door down and make sure that your voice is heard and that you have your tribe. And that's what I think is so special about opportunities like this. It's finding people in community that while our journeys are different and how we get there. But so for me, when I reflect, it's like, it was a struggle for me to get out front, and I recognize that. And so I often find myself representing other women and leaders who are like me, who naturally don't find themselves out front. But once we're there, we know we belong.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
I think, for me, I think back to the fact that, like, I've had the opportunity to sit at a lot of tables and I could have said something and maybe didn't. And so I think, there just came a point where I was like, I'm going to trust that what I'm thinking is right. And I'm going to follow my gut and my intuition and say, if I'm thinking it, the other leaders at the table might be thinking it, and I'm going to say it, right? So I'm going to be brave and I'm going to tap into who I am. And after time, my expertise and the skills that I've gathered. And so I think that's how I, in my opinion, went from kind of stepping into being visible, right?
Yeah.
Like, we all make choices and sometimes we choose to be quiet. But I think to Lisa's point, like, we have to, at some point start to realize that maybe I need to be heard.
Right. Maybe
by me sharing my voice, it'll allow somebody else to feel comfortable, somebody else to feel brave, somebody else to feel like, oh, I should do the same. And I think that, again, it's that role modeling.
Right.
And really also kind of just elevating sometimes the conversation in the room, and having people feel like, oh, I'm about to do what Lisa just did.
Right.
Let me get in this.
Yeah. It's weird because I'm thinking about, I'm not going to say my boss's name, but I know he's going to watch because he's like, I'm going to make sure he watches this. But I had a few people in my career that used to tell me I could do these things that I'm like, they said for visibility, I'm like, they are great. I'm going to give you an example. So I worked for this company for a long time. Love this company. So shout out to the people at the company I'm talking about. Love them. I grew up there. Like I still talk to people there. And in this company, I learned how to speak Japanese for my job. Okay, so, and I remember there was an event, and we had a group of people from Japan coming, which was normal, but this was like something very special. And he was like, "Why don't you do the introduction all in Japanese?" I'm like, "Japanese?" I'm like, He's like, you'll be fine. You can do it. I'm like, oh my God. Like, and it was like in front of a lot of people with a microphone, okay? On a softball field. Yes. Y'all know what I'm talking about. And I did it. And so I was just thinking, I'm kind of like you, Lisa. I got pulled out into these situations. And I had a mentor that used to make announcements. She's like, "Natasha, I know you're behind the curtain. Come on out in front of the curtain." You know, so it wasn't a forced thing, but it was always someone there, like an ally person that really, they thought you could do anything. And usually you did. And then that gave you the confidence, like, to do it, you know.
I love what you're saying because it makes me think about like when I was transitioning from working more on the operational side to shifting over to being in leadership development and learning in OD and things like that. I was interviewing, you know, for a position, and one of my favorite bosses, basically, it was in the interview, and he was just like, "You are so impressive." But he was like, "I need to know, are you an expert in this space?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm an expert in this space." And he was like, "Well, I want you to meet with some other people as part of the interview process, and I need them to know that you're an expert in this space, right?" And so I got off the call with him just feeling so energized because he wasn't telling me how to pad my resume. He wasn't telling me I needed to make ish up. He was basically saying, like, tell them who you are.
Right, exactly. Right.
And so when I went into all these interviews, I kind of like led with like, I am the expert. I've done this. I've been there, all that kind of stuff, right? And to your point, that's not how I would have led or presented. I would have led more humble, right? To say like, you see on paper, right? And I just felt like, to your point, like he was almost like the hype man in my ear. Like, are you the expert is what he asked me. And so again, we need people to kind of tell us like, you playing it safe right now. And I need you to turn up, you know? And so that's what came up for me just now.
It's been so great. I've been so lucky. It sounds like you all had too, to have people that just, and at that moment, you're just like, I hate you. But then you do it, you're like, oh, I look good. Like, you know, there's you want to make them feel good about, you know, having trust and confidence in you.
That's right.
So succession planning and mentorship are at the heart of your work. Okay. And I take a pause there because I don't, it's one of those things that, you know, maybe just generally speaking, people don't really think about that. But we've been trained in our field that's the job, part of the job is to think about succession planning and mentorship. So what does it really mean to prepare, you know, and it doesn't have to be necessarily the next generation, but the next group of leaders without also holding yourself back. So again, you got to think about that, but also not forget about yourself. So what does that mean to you? So what does it really mean to prepare a group of leaders without holding yourself back?
Yeah, for me, I think it's developing people, but I like to share like a lot of personal stories. Okay. So, and I think in those opportunities, it really allows me to kind of keep true to who I am and where I've been, and also, you know, my mentors, I try to make a part of my network, right? Okay. So even if I have this finite time with them as a part of our formal mentoring programs and the like, I then want to make them a part of my community, right? And I often, when I think about people I mentor, I look for people who were similar to me in my journey in terms of they look like they're, you know, a little timid or maybe not sure of themselves. And I find that when I'm able to do that, I kind of can keep my story and keep on my history and, you know, make new professional friends. And so for me, it's really about making sure as we think about the next level of leaders, and I think about myself as, you know, I never feel like I'm giving anything up. I actually feel like I'm paying it forward.
Okay.
And I often say, to whom much is given, much is required. And so we all have shared stories about bosses along the way, and so many people have poured into me that I feel like it is my obligation and my responsibility to do the same. And I'm mindful of that obligation, and so it doesn't feel hard or daunting. It actually, for someone who gets drained a lot by people, that's actually very energizing. And I try to let people step into their leadership journey as we're mentoring them and planning for their future, making it about them, but also sharing when it's appropriate about, I had that same kind of struggle, or, I still struggle with that. And often as a mentor, what we say is when you're mentoring other people, you're also getting some type of purpose driver for yourself.
Right.
So as a part of leadership, as you're mentoring the next group of leaders, to hear about what are the things that they're being challenged with, or what is it that, gets their cereal not the way they want it in the morning, and taking that and bringing it back in our organizations and our communities and making those opportunities better for the next group. So that's kind of how I look at it, so I don't feel like I'm giving up anything for myself. I actually walk side by side with people in the journey, and then that kind of gives me the a lot of energy to keep doing what we do, because it can be hard sometimes.
Actually, Lisa, your last comment really made me think about a lot of bad bosses that I've had in my career, and toxic environments that led me to want to develop other leaders. It's hard when you work in an environment and you're looking at like people who don't care about you. And you're a leader, you're supposed to be leading other people, and your leader is not, supportive. And so that, fueled me to say, I want to be the person to support somebody that I see that's struggling. I want to be the person to say to somebody, you can do this or you can do that, and really help them get through. Because you feel like you're on an island sometimes when you're a leader. Oftentimes you feel like you're on an island, and there's nobody there for you to keep it real with, nobody there for you to kind of get unsolicited advice. And so I think my personal experiences working in some challenging environments made me feel like one day, I'm going to reach back or I'm going to speak up on somebody else's behalf when nobody spoke up on my behalf. So I think, to me, leadership development is personal because I feel like I'm really being an advocate and a champion and whatever they need me to be for somebody who may not have somebody else in their corner.
You know what that made me think? The question talked about succession planning. It might be good for you to maybe, Monique, if you can explain to everyone what succession planning is. But my question also with that is, in that, do you find that this next group of leaders, like, do they even want to do this? And because I'm just thinking, even if they look at, maybe things that we've done or other people have done, it doesn't always look like it's something that I hear this, like, if I have to do that, I don't want to do that. So I'm just wondering where visibility fits in succession planning. Can you, what do you think?
Yeah, so succession planning in organizations is really trying to be prepared and really trying to build bench strength and saying, who do I have in my organization? What leaders or even non-leaders do I have? How can I groom them, develop them, and kind of get them on some kind of track or career path so that they could take over certain positions? I'm going to tell you, I've worked for a lot of organizations, and many of them don't do it right.
Right.
I think when turmoil hits or there's a random opening in a leadership position, especially senior leadership and executive leadership, they hire from the outside.
Right.
If you had effective succession planning, at least smiling, you would have people prepared and trained and able to slide into a position, right? I love the question about, the current generation and the folks that are working in the workplace. No, they don't want to be leaders. You know why? Because they are a little bit more sane and they want freedom. They want flexibility. Yeah. They don't want to be locked down.
Right.
And leadership comes at a cost. When you're a leader, you're really, even though, when you're interviewed and when you're hired, we have work-life balance. Yeah. We all have worked in HR, we have all these things. But when you're in it, it's a 24/7 job.
Right. Yeah.
And so this new generation,
and people don't want to hear that. That's the other thing, because you know how we are, right?
Mhm.
Try to give one side the coin, but people don't really want to hear that.
That's right.
She said it. She's the one
That's right.
about work-life balance. But there has to be some give and take, and not, then you're gonna, you really do damage to yourself.
And burn out.
But that stops a lot of people in their tracks. They don't want to be on call 24/7.
That's right.
Or what they think that
Looks
it actually
like.
means.
Yeah. And you know what? It's interesting because I wrote an article about a year ago about the fact that a lot of leaders would be like, I can't take off because if I'm off, what's going to happen?
Right.
And if you train your staff and work and trust your staff, when you're off, life will go on.
Right.
And I'm going to tell you something on the flip side. I know many senior leaders who went away, came back, and were let go. And guess what? Life went on in the organization.
Okay.
So you know what I mean by that is that it's a dog-eat-dog world out there.
Yeah.
We're all replaceable.
Right.
We think that we have to give 1,000,000 hours and do all these things, but the organization will keep on running with or without us. So with that being said, I'm not saying don't do a good job.
Right,
I'm not
right.
saying don't give your all, but recognize you deserve to have a balance. You deserve to have rest, peace, and all those things, and do your best and pour into the workplace.
Right.
So I think that's just an important message that I always try and tell folks that I'm, mentoring or coaching. There's two sides to this, and you only have one plate, and you have to make space for yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. It's one of those lessons you have to learn. Like, honestly, I don't want to go back to learning that lesson. I don't want to go back at all. Like, oh my goodness. So, we do know, like, when you put your energy to other people, whether you're in this space, or it doesn't just have to be what we do. It could be you're a teacher, like you're a caregiver, you're in public service. There is energy exchange that actually happens there. And, for me, I always think about it from the spiritual perspective, and then the mind-body perspective. That's just me, because they usually go together.
Yeah.
One can impact each other. And so for that, I'm on a spiritual journey like a lot of people are. And so I know both of you are also on a spiritual journey, and whatever that means for you. But how does the inner work that you do influence how you lead, coach, and mentor people? Yeah.
Well, I think your personality alone also just kind of shows up in how you lead others, and then whatever you prescribe to in terms of your spiritual journey and how you kind of guide your life. I think people can see that in how you coach, and how you mentor. So often, people tell me, like, Lisa, you're just so calm and you're so practical. And because that's how I lead my life. I had to learn very early on. I used to get migraines when I was little from stress. If I wasn't the best in school or whatever thing, it triggered me in a way. And so I actually had to really be intentional about how I respond to stress and to the world.
You are calm. Listen, I've been in situations where you are calm, but you are present too.
Yes,
like,
right.
You're calm and pissed.
Yes, and absolutely, and we think we have to make a choice,
That's
right? And
exactly.
so, being calm doesn't mean you're weak.
That's right.
Right. And I choose on how I'm going to respond to things and how they're going to impact me. And so I think how I kind of guide my life and how I think about my own spirituality and how I stay grounded in the things that keep me who I am. I hope that when people interact with me that they can feel that, right? So we can't walk around and say that while we're not perfect and we're still growing, we can't show ourselves as not as people who are invested in our spirituality and the energy that we're giving off. And then ask others to do the same, especially in leadership, right? So we're asking leaders to, no matter what you're going through, you still have to show up for people, engage with them, make sure that they feel like they belong, that they are being seen, that they're protected and respected and connected to whatever the thing is. So you can't, and that does, again, we all have bad days, but I'm hoping that the way that I kind of lead my life and the thing that I'm invested in, people can see it without me speaking about it, and that I'm hoping that makes people want to come to me when they have challenges and when they feel like there's nobody else in the organization or in their circle that they can go to, whether it's because of judgment or you just want somebody who's going to be a good active listener. So I really take that personal.
Yeah.
And it's really invested in terms of, I want to portray myself in a way that people can tell how I'm guiding my life. And I hope that shows up in my coaching and my leadership.
Yeah. Because they are coming to you. People do ask us for advice. I get asked for, I'm going to use the word advice, whatever you want to call it. And you have to really be, because sometimes you want to tell them like, listen, and it's not, you have to be aligned yourself because you can't give bad advice.
No.
And it can if you are not really, just lined up in for your own self, your own spirit, you give bad advice and that can do some harm to people, and I take that very serious. And then people won't listen to you anymore because you get bad advice and it falls, doesn't fall very well. Yeah.
I think that's probably one of my favorite things about coaching and what led to me getting certified in coaching is that it took away some of that responsibility because I think just like you, your phone is always off the hook, Natasha. Yeah. But, people come to you for advice or they see me as a problem solver. But with coaching, it's like, I'm going to partner with you, but I'm not going to do your work, right? I'm going to be supportive.
That really is you, Monique, because I've heard Monique give people, but she stops right before she tells you how to do it. And you're like, keep going. She's like, no, you do it yourself.
For you. It's for you, right?
Yeah.
And I think it does, tap a little bit into your question around spirituality, because for me, I think that's at the core of everything I do. Like, again, I think just thinking professionally, on the outside, I think people always think like, wow, you've had so many great titles. You've, had such a great journey. Like everything must have been easy, but, it's not been, right? Like, it's kind of like how they say, like, you look at me, but you can't see what I've been through. And I just know that, like, for me, God protects me in such a way and puts me in such situations and saves me from so many things that, I don't question anything, right? Like what's for me is for me. And so I think I also mentor and coach people in that way of like, it doesn't have to make sense because life doesn't make sense, right? It has to be right for you at that moment. And I think, again, it's just about having a safe space and providing kind of like a solidarity with people to be like, it doesn't have to be my way. It doesn't have to like, be at the right time. It just like, whatever works. And I'm here for it.
Yeah.
So I think just being that safe space and, like providing that open and honest and vulnerable environment for other people to just be them is always like what I strive for, because that's the core of who I am.
You could always tell a leader, especially at a certain level, where they never had to be vulnerable before. Can y'all tell? There are people out there that just, I'm not saying nothing has ever happened to them that's not negative, but they've never allowed themselves to even, be vulnerable a little bit. And just, little side reference, there's a book called The 5 Dysfunctions of the Team by Patrick Lencioni. And there's like a pyramid, and he talks about that to build, trust, you have to be vulnerable to build trust. And then it just goes up from there and there and there. And so they're at the top, but something's not quite, there's something missing, and a lot of times it's because they've never really showed their vulnerability, and they don't feel like they're not actually touched. You can't even touch them,
Yeah.
Just almost doesn't. What do y'all think about that?
Yeah, I think it's a muscle that you have to work. And I've actually worked with leaders who are a little bit more seasoned and been in the workforce a little bit longer. And they actually say that they were taught that bringing that vulnerability was not appropriate in the workplace, right? We were taught early on, when you cross that threshold, you leave personal at home and you're at work. And for some people, they attach vulnerability to sharing personal stories. And so I've often coached leaders who have shared that they struggle with that part of what we might call emotional intelligence or, sharing personal stories. And so I have seen it often. And I think what I hear from them is just, I don't think that's appropriate in the workplace. And I think what we've learned, over the years, especially since the pandemic, is that people want an authentic leader that seems like a person, that it allows people to feel like they can make a mistake and still learn, and that we're looking at how we improve the process, that we're not creating a blameful environment. And I think the leaders that have strong engagement and that have people who want to work for them are able to say, I remember when I was first in that spot, right? So I find it interesting, though, that leaders actually think it's a bad thing to show vulnerability because to err is human. So I see it, but I often try to correct it. But, it's like, again, I think it's a muscle. If you haven't had a life journey of trying to figure that out, and the thing we haven't talked a lot about is self-awareness, right? I think self-awareness for for anybody on their journey of whether to be a leader or just kind of get to know yourself more personally, you have to pause and say, what things am I projecting that aren't for the betterment of the people around me, even though it feels comfortable not to be vulnerable. But I also give people grace because you don't know what's in people's backgrounds and that they haven't had an opportunity to really unpack that and maybe never got any feedback about that. But I absolutely see it probably more than you think.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think it's actually more common to not be vulnerable, and from where I've been, than for people to be like, I'm tapped into this and I'm ready to let people see the personal side of me.
And we've come from the generation you're not supposed to cry. Everybody who knows me, you cry in the car or you cry in the Dunkin' Donuts drive.
Oh, okay.
You don't cry at work. And I completely did not follow that rule several times recently. Anyway, but there's, we wonder what's really wrong with that. And, it's more of emotional intelligence. So I do know what you're saying.
Well, I was also going to say it's a generational thing, right?
Yeah,
and the majority of folks that are in executive positions, broadly are kind of like the boomers phasing out, right? And some Gen Xers. And so it is very generational to say that you better stay plastic.
That's right.
You better, keep that right face up when you're in the workplace. But I think that, again, when people can see a real part of who you are, they'll respect you even more.
Right.
And they'll want to follow you.
Exactly.
And they'll want to be there for you. And I think I realized on my personal journey that I was always very real and kind of vulnerable with my staff. People who reported to me, they knew me. They knew Monique. But the people higher up, I had to put the plastic on, right? Or how I presented, because I want to grow and I want you to see me a certain way.
Yeah.
And I think that, when I got to my points of, self-awareness and realizing you can actually show them who you truly are and still, execute in the workplace. It was less energy for me because I was just who I am all the time. And so I say that to say, when I'm coaching executives, I do that too. How are you showing up right now?
Right.
And is that how you want people to see you? Because maybe they don't realize you mean the best for them by what they're seeing.
Yeah.
So self-awareness, I agree, is so important when it comes to, that's a whole episode in itself.
Absolutely.
So many women listening right now are mentors, coaches, leaders, and maybe they're not any of that. Maybe they're just a woman that is a important person in their family unit or in their community. What would you say to that woman who feels called, really called to support others, but is also sensing that there's time for her to step fully into her light? So she might be in that transition period, or there's something going on where she feels that she needs to make a move here.
Yeah, I mean, I would say do it. There's space for both. There's space for you to look back or look at someone and say, I think that I can help you grow. And I can still have goals and aspirations and ambitions for myself. Because, I mean, that's who I am. I think we don't have to wait until we're all dried up and tired and exhausted. And now we're giving fumes to other people. Right. So I see it as kind of two separate lanes.
Monique. They reward that. The more downtrodden you look, and the more, can we just take a pause for a second?
Yeah.
The more tired you are, and you're breathing hard, and you hadn't got your hair done, and or anything like that, and you looked all, it's oh my God, they work so hard. I think sometimes there's a reward for that. What do you think?
You're right.
I'm done with that.
I think it's changing though, because I have young daughters, and they don't aspire to that. They don't prescribe to that, and they want balance in their life. Mm-hmm. They're not inspired by their mother looking downtrodden and all these hours down. Right. So I do think it is generational, and I do see the shift of people really setting boundaries and figuring out how you can do both. So I think that would be my word of advice is like, you know, reflect on what that means for you, because we all mentor differently, right? It could be formal mentorship, informal mentorship. It could be that you're just checking in with someone. And I think also you don't have to have it all together. You know, sometimes we think a mentor has reached the pinnacle of their career. They got their planner all fixed up, but we're all just trying to figure it out, right? We're all a work in progress. So I think if you're called, right, reflect on what that calling is and quantify what that might look for you. Like, you know, and how are you not going to give up what is important to you while you do that? And but I'm like with Monique, do it. I think we all need people who are pouring into us, and I would, you know, if I didn't have the people over my life who really were invested in me, I wouldn't be where I am today. So I think it's a perfect time to do it.
I agree, and I like that you brought up the babies, right? Because I have a 13-year-old, and I feel that I'm doing it also in part because I want people to pour into her too. You know, I don't feel that, you know, when I was on my professional journey that I had a million people saying, Monique, I have some ideas for you, or you should do this, or you should do that. I'm like fumbling, tripping, getting Band-Aids. Right. So I have to say, when you know better, you do better. And so I do it for myself, but I also do it, you know, for my daughter and for other, you know, young Black girls that I see and other just women in general. You know, I think it's just so hard to sometimes feel that like you might not even know where to start. And so to Lisa's point, everything doesn't have to be so formal, right? Like I've had people that I may not have given them the title of mentor in my life, but they've touched me or they've given me guidance, you know, when I've needed it. You know, the best advice usually comes when you don't even ask for it, right? It just sneaks up on you. And so I think I take that, you know, to heart, and I do that now. If I see somebody and I'm just like, why haven't you applied for that job? That looks like something that you'd be good for. Well, I didn't know do it. You know, call me. Let's get 30 minutes on the books. Let me help you look at your resume. Right? Unsolicited. Nobody asked me. But sometimes you need somebody to like give you that push, you know, or they're overanalyzing, you know, the situation. And you need another person to say, look, woman to woman, I want you to realize that you got this. And I want to see you win, and you're gonna win. And just somebody giving you that vote of confidence shifts everything. So I think when I'm so glad to hear that your whole podcast series is called Queenmaker, because it's not an overnight transition.
No.
And I think that this is only one part of the conversation, but there's so many tools that are needed to really fully create a queen. And I think I'm still being made into one. Personally. So it's a journey.
Definitely. You know, it definitely was not an overnight situation. You all know it's not an overnight situation. And also sometimes I think, to your point, when you go up to a person, you say, apply for that job. Sometimes that's the spirit is telling you to do that. Like that person needs to hear that. And you are basically a messenger for something that they may have said that they actually wanted, and they need to hear it, you know, in the 3D. They need to hear the voice say, apply for that job. And it's already something that they actually want.
And I think especially for women, speaking of queen makers, sometimes we put our kids, our husbands, our friends, everybody else in front of us, and we have a list of things that we're going to do eventually. And I think that like that's one of my, you know, kind of mainstay mottos. Is do it now and do it anyway. You know, you don't have to wait till your kid is 25, 35, 45, 50 for you to tap into yourself. You know, do it now. You can start back to school now. You don't have to take 12 credits, take 3. You know what I mean? You can start exploring entrepreneurship, even if you know that you're not going to be ready to step into that later. So I just think like that's my encouragement to say, stop waiting and do something now. You don't have to do it now, but do something now.
Right. Well, this has been a great conversation. I do have another question. And, you know, it is called the Queenmaker Podcast. And that name just came in like it's been a while. And I just believe that, you know, there are lessons that are learned to become a queen. And, you know, and any woman can be a queen. And it also goes for our kings, too. It's not just, you know, for queens. But I would like to hear from you, both of you, like, what is Queenmaker? When I say Queenmaker, what does that really mean to you? What resonates with you?
Well, first of all, I'm super excited for you and the idea of Queenmaker and watching it come to fruition. Yeah. I know what your journey has been like. And when I think about that, it's, how do we all kind of come into ourselves and navigate the challenges with, our community and our sisters beside us and even behind us, men that are our allies and lifting us up. I can't think of all the men bosses that I've had who probably have really advocated for me in behind closed doors. So Queenmaker for me is how do we help women step into who they're becoming and how do we champion and cheerlead for each other. And, when our crowns get a little heavy and tilted, how do you put it right back up? And I think that often as women, we feel like we have to be loud and strong in the workplace to advance. And sometimes that humble, quiet leadership still works. And that leadership is not going to look the same for everybody. And being a queen. So one of the things that I have kind of really held on to, because also sometimes I found myself comparing myself to other people, like, oh, they're here now, I'm not, and they got this title. And, comparison is the thief of joy. Yeah. Run your race and surround yourself with people. You're only as good as your tribe, too. Yes. And so that's why I'm just grateful to be on this platform with women such as both you and Monique who really, step into being a queen. And so I think we all have our journey and how we can help one another.
Love that. Yeah. I mean, I think for me, Queenmaker in itself speaks of both strong intention and action at the same time. And so it's really like being purposeful about stepping forward in a certain way where it's like, to your point, I don't have to play it safe. I can still be in the spotlight and I can bring some friends along too. Yes. Right? Yes. And we could tag in and out. My time in the spotlight might not be your time in the spotlight. And so Queenmaker to me is just about saying, like, we have to support each other, like Lisa was saying. And, we'll know when the time is right to do certain things. I wrote a whole book called You Know Best because I can't tell you when your time is, but I can encourage you along the way. And I can maybe push you into something, like how your boss pushed you into speaking Japanese on the baseball field. Listen. But, sometimes we need those little nudges and we need somebody else to say, I see you. And then we can see ourselves a little clearer. So Queenmaker to me is perfect in the title. And it's really something that we all should strive to be and to do for other people. Right.
Well, thank you both for being here. This is just so surreal. Like we were talking about this and it's just, again, it had to be you two. And how I called you like, oh my God, you have to hear the rock. And you all said yes and everything worked out. And I have so much gratitude for you both. And I know you'll be back. It's not going to be the first time. But I'm so honored for you to be on the very first episode of Queenmaker.
Thank you.
So I want to thank you for your honesty and your wisdom and your leadership. And so this conversation reminds us that queenship is not about choosing between self and service. It's about honoring both. Thank you both for the wisdom you shared, not just today, but over the years. This conversation reminds me that leadership isn't about choosing between service and self. It's about learning how to honor both. And that's the heart of Queenmaker. We don't rise by disappearing. We rise by becoming together. As we close today, I invite you to sit with what stirred, not to rush into action, but to honor the insight that found you. Leadership isn't about doing more. It's about listening deeper, choosing wisely, and trusting your own knowing. If this conversation resonated, please like this episode and subscribe here on YouTube. It's how this space continues to grow and how more women find their way here. And if you'd like to stay connected between episodes, you can follow me on Instagram at LiveWellHeal, where I share reflections and behind-the-scenes moments.